Andrew Cole adjusted his son's backpack before the school bell rang. "Be good today, Max." The 8-year-old smiled. "I always am." Andrew laughed. "That's not what your teacher told me last week." Since losing his wife 4 years earlier, Andrew had devoted every part of his life to raising Max. He worked as a financial consultant, lived modestly, and avoided unnecessary attention. Few people knew he had once helped build a successful investment firm before walking away after his wife's passing. Across the city, Victoria Harrington stepped out of a limousine and into the headquarters of her family's multinational company. At 32, Victoria had everything money could buy. Everything except peace. Her grandfather's will contained one final condition. To become chairwoman of the family holding company, she had to be legally married before her 33rd birthday. She had exactly 6 months. She refused to marry for appearances. Yet she refused to lose the company her grandfather had built. After dozens of disastrous introductions arranged by lawyers and family friends, Victoria came up with an unusual idea. A temporary marriage. 6 months. No expectations. No romance. No claim to each other's wealth. When the agreement ended, they would quietly divorce and continue their separate lives. Through a mutual attorney, she met Andrew. He listened carefully as the proposal was explained. When Victoria finished, she expected him to walk away. Instead, Andrew asked only one question. "How will this affect my son?" Victoria paused. She hadn't expected that. After discussing clear boundaries, legal protections, and ensuring Max's well-being came first, Andrew reluctantly agreed. The contract was straightforward. They would remain married for exactly 6 months. On the 180th day, they would sign divorce papers. No arguments. No extensions. No emotional complications. At least, that was the plan. The first weeks were awkward. Victoria buried herself in work. Andrew focused on Max. They lived more like respectful roommates than husband and wife. Everything began changing because of Max. One evening, Victoria returned home exhausted after a difficult board meeting. She expected silence. Instead, she found Andrew and Max covered in flour while attempting to bake cookies. The kitchen looked like a disaster. Victoria couldn't help laughing. What happened here? Max proudly held up a misshapen cookie. We followed the recipe. Andrew smiled. Mostly. For the first time in months, Victoria forgot about quarterly reports and shareholder meetings. She joined them. Another evening, Max asked Victoria to attend his school play. She almost declined because of an important business dinner. Andrew simply said, "He'll understand if you can't come." Those words stayed with her. She cancelled the dinner. The smile on Max's face that night was worth more than any business deal. Weeks turned into months. The contract remained on the dining room table. Untouched. Rarely mentioned. Victoria slowly became part of routines she had never imagined. Helping with homework. Family movie nights. Saturday breakfasts. Listening to Max talk endlessly about dinosaurs. Somewhere along the way, the house stopped feeling temporary. It started feeling like home. Then came day 179. Only one day remained before the contract expired. Andrew quietly packed a small suitcase after Max had fallen asleep. He intended to keep his promise. No arguments. No pressure. A deal was a deal. As he reached for the front door, Victoria walked into the hallway. She looked at the suitcase. Then at Andrew. Tears filled her eyes. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Please." She struggled to finish the sentence. Then finally whispered the words she never believed she would say. "Don't leave." Andrew slowly set the suitcase down. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt heavier than any conversation they had ever shared. Victoria wiped away a tear before it could fall. "I know what the contract says," she whispered. "And I know I was the one who wrote it." She gave a small, sad smile. But somewhere along the way, she looked toward Max's bedroom. This stopped feeling like an arrangement. Andrew took a deep breath. "You're sure?" Victoria nodded. "I don't want a 6-month husband anymore. I want a real family." The words hung in the air. Andrew had promised himself he would never pressure Victoria to stay married. He had been preparing to leave because he believed keeping his word was the honorable thing to do. But now, she was asking him to stay. Just then, a sleepy voice came from the hallway. "Dad?" Both of them turned. Max stood there holding his favorite blanket. His eyes moved from the suitcase to Victoria's tear-filled face. "Are you leaving?" Andrew knelt beside his son. The agreement was supposed to end today. Max looked confused. "But this is our home." No one answered. The little boy slowly walked over to Victoria and took her hand. Then he reached for Andrew's. Without saying another word, he placed their hands together. "I think," he said softly, "we're already a family." Victoria couldn't hold back her tears. Andrew smiled as he gently squeezed her hand. "You know," he said, "your son is a pretty good negotiator." Max grinned. "I learned from watching both of you." The next morning, instead of driving to the lawyer's office to sign divorce papers, they all went together. The attorney opened the file. "I've prepared the divorce documents." Andrew and Victoria looked at each other. Then Victoria smiled. "We won't be needing them." The attorney blinked. "You're staying married?" Andrew nodded. "This marriage may have started with a contract." He looked at Victoria. "But it continues because we choose each other." Several months later, Victoria officially became chairwoman of the company. During her acceptance speech, reporters expected her to talk about profits, strategy, and growth. Instead, she smiled toward the front row, where Andrew and Max were sitting. "My grandfather believed success meant building something that lasts," she said. "For years, I thought he meant a business." She shook her head gently. "Now I know he also meant a family." The audience applauded warmly. That evening, the three of them celebrated with pizza at home instead of dining at an expensive restaurant. Max looked around the table and laughed. "You know what's funny?" "What?" Andrew asked. "We almost got divorced before we ever had a real argument." Everyone burst into laughter. Years later, the framed 6-month marriage contract still sat in a drawer. Not as a reminder of a deal, but as proof that life doesn't always follow the plans we write. Sometimes the strongest relationships begin in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes, the promise that changes everything isn't the one written on paper. It's the one spoken from the heart. Please,